Hello, welcome to Graffiti. My name's Tom Blomain and I'll be your host for this show. What we're going to do on Graffiti is talk about poetry. Today, being the first show, I thought we would examine some of our area's literary tradition and culture, that being the Cole legacy. Our area is blessed with very many artists, musicians, writers, and of course poets. The Cole legacy has had a great impact on a large number of poets, particularly those of my generation. And as you come up writing poetry, I think a lot of times you have to work through your Cole poems. This book that I'll be reading from Cole Seam was originally published in 1992 by the University of Scranton Press. The editor of the book was my illustrious sister, Karen Blomain, and I'm going to be reading some selections from this book today and then move to another one in a minute or two. But thank you for joining us in the initial foray into the literary arts, and hopefully we'll have other shows like this down the road. What I'd like to start with is a poem by W.S. Merwin called Lackawanna. It is in this anthology, and W.S. Merwin, a lot of people may not know, is one of the foremost poets actually in the world. Currently lives in Hawaii, but spent many years of his childhood in Westside. And a lot of his writings have evolved to environmentalism, environmental activism, and he has addressed the legacy of Cole and his relationship to it in numerous poems and essays that he's written. The winner of the Pulitzer Prize for his book called The Carrier of Ladders. This poem from the anthology Cole Seam is called Lackawanna. Where you begin in me, I have never seen, but I believe it now, rising dark but clear. Later, when I lived where you went past, already you were black, moving under gases by red windows, obedient child, I shrank from you. On girders of your bridges I ran, told to be afraid, obedient. The arches never touched you, the running shadow never looked, the iron and black ice never stopped ringing underfoot. Terror, a truth, lived alone in the stained buildings, in the streets, a smoke, an eyelid, a clock, a black winter, all year, like a dust, melting and freezing in silence, you flowed from under and through the night. The dead drifted down you, all the dead. What was found later, no one could recognize. Told to be afraid, I wake black to the knees, so it has happened, I have set foot in you, both feet. Jordan, too long I was ashamed at a distance. That poem, in my view, kind of addresses the coming together with the love-hate relationship that many people have with both our region and, in fact, our legacy as a coal town. And W.S. Merwin does that in that poem. Next, I'd like to read a poem from Maggie Martin. This poem called I Come From Coal. My ears resound with the sound of coal avalanching down the metal chute into the basement coal bin, gleaming blue-black common gems, falling over one another, loudly piling up and up as I stood watching, fearing I'd be swallowed by them, never to breathe again, my mouth packed tight with rounded chunks of darkness. Saved by the shriek of metal as the chute withdrew, I sucked in a breath and plunged into the mound with my shovel, taming the pile, while my father fed the furnace, its mouth gaping, fiery tongues lashing, red-hot nuggets crackling like the fires of hell. I come from coal. My bones are filled with marrow. Black liquid carbon fills my veins. The legacy of men whose faces never saw the light of day, whose lungs were filled with pockets filled with dust, whose hearts beat out a rhythm as they dug into the earth's jet core. My mouth tastes of the waiting, the ritual of women who listen for the warning sound, the shattering of the shaft as they birthed the children cooked the meals, pretending not to wait. It's Maggie Martin's poem called I Come From Coal. Paul Kelly, also a Scranton boy by birth, wrote this poem also about the river. It's called The River. Where waters rushed, now no longer this river, Lackawanna, Lackawannock. It enters the picture of this valley, which takes its name from the river itself, at Uniondale, and moves southwesterly through Forest City, Simpson, Carbondale, Mayfield, German, Archbald, Peckville, Jessup, Dixon City, Scranton, Moosic, Hughstown, drawing these towns together like knots in its slow flow. It goes out into the Susquehanna at Coxton, just north of Pittston, and on to Chesapeake Bay and the sea, the Shawnee and the Moosic Mountains on either side, the valley, deer and moose, among the laurel and the hemlock and the pine, the river abounding once with fish, a slow-moving stream of sewage and refuse and waste, now offends, or is a joke. The lackey, we laughed at it as kids, full of old tires, shoes, floating condoms, rusted-out junked cars we used to sit in to drive, on the banks where we trapped rats, at the foot of Court Street near Ella Burns's bar under the bridge at Albright Avenue, so full of stink and shit that a baseball homered into the water was unusable thereafter. It was so fouled we called it an automatic out. 5 miles, the city, its banks. Fortunately, we've had a great deal of activism in recent years, over the past couple of decades, to resurrect the Lackawanna River into a rather pristine flow now in trout fishing and such. But the river, fortunately for us all, is not what it was at the time that Paul wrote this poem. As indeed our entire valley is much improved from the dregs of the coal legacy that had left burning, smoking mountains along the highway, burning mines underground. We're past all that. And one of the reasons I think for this particular show is that as we go past that, we also sort of go past the literature and lose the artistic and literary heritage that has produced so many memorable and important works of poetry. So it's important to remember that legacy as well. Jay Perini is a very internationally known poet, writer, critic, scholar, who also from Scranton and still visits periodically. Jay's poem in this book is called The Miner's Wake. The small ones squirmed in suits and dresses, wrapped their rosaries round the chair legs, tapped the walls with squeaky shoes, but their widowed mother at 34 had mastered every pose of mourning, plodding the sadness like an ox through mud. Her mind rang well ahead of her heart, making calculations of the years without him that stretched before her like a humid summer. The walnut coffin, honeyed in sunlight, calla lilies bloomed over silk and satin, nuns cried heaven into their hands, while I, a nephew, with my lesser grief, sat by a window watching pigeons settle onto slag like summer snow. Whew! That's Jay Perini's poem from this book. Craig Chury is a regional poet who has gained quite a bit of international renown as well. Originally from the back mountain area of Wilkes-Barre, Craig's lived all over this area and has written many, many poems addressing the coal history and has lectured and read internationally on the very subject. His poem in this book is called Bells Like Sad Angels. Craig Chury. I just remember the voice, biotone, and singing. Nothing I could really see, only a lot of colorful glass stained pictures of hippies and Orthodox Russian Christmas bells, the Volga boat song, where bells like sad angels drone off our block houses into slag. They named this old coal town Welsh for the doctor who rescued Ruski miners early with his tonic, sugar whiskey with dye. It's Sunday, and I'm up over Summit Street rummaging through the dump for Jimmy Hoffa, driving my old Dodge around the lid of a Campbell's soup can lid. Everything here you need for your backyard, this huge wooden cable spool, batteries, tires of junk, aluminum. A good day after rain to climb around the lorry breaker or just walk the tracks down where the D&H blew open a coal seam and laid bare the face of a woman. Coal chin, forehead, and nose of a woman, weeping real mud ice tears. That's Craig Cherry's poem, Bells Like Sad Angels. This poem, Hospital View, is by my sister Karen Blomain, also the editor of this volume. Tonight, darkness sifts down from the mountains, wide hips around the Anthracite Valley. Below this window, decayed row houses bulge with poor, switching off the day. A Vietnam vet lives at the corner, collects his pension, and spends the month driving a yellow VW through his private jungle. Even from this distance, winter's hard-bodied, the sludge and ice at street corners stiffen, ice a glitter like coal under streetlight. As teenagers, we couldn't wait to leave a town that had worn our parents' lives away. In backyards filled with children and tomatoes, sopped wash, struggled in the wind as we planned better lives, while television hooted through dark waves of steaming cabbage and complaints. We used the word stuck for what would happen if we didn't leave, and thought of wide open butterflies impaled on pins in the Everhart Museum. So we went as far as luck would take us, into one jungle and not quite back, or like me, wrecked and wakeful in the scant comfort of winter's sorry light. That's Karen's poem called Hospital View. This poem is mine from this anthology, and it's called Dog Hole. A dog hole, is, if you don't know, is an illegal mine shaft dug typically near an existing mine so that someone could steal the coal. And as it happens, this poem I wrote shortly after this incident actually happened in Southside, where an old man lived alone and actually had a dog hole beneath his house. So this poem is called Dog Hole. I imagine him plotting before he got old, how he would rob the mine through a dog hole beneath his house, the condemned, now ruined South Side home where his family had lived for years. Before they shut off the power, the heat, the water, the phone, he must have spread out stolen charts on the table alone, searching for the closest vein. I imagine him then starting to dig, filling wood pails from the basement, dumping them secretly outside, tediously, like a prisoner tunneling out. He had to have started long before he got old, finally locating the coal and chipping away, dragging it out 2 buckets at a time when his triceps would permit, crawling up backwards, backing out through the 100-foot black hole, spilling more each time now, his arms bony and sore, feeding the coal to his relic stove, heating the house where he lived at 77, alone in the dark, but for the flickering anthracite glow. Officially condemned by concerned authorities, the place burned like kindling one night, collapsing onto the illegal shaft, claiming the miner and his need to retreat to the hole. Another grief consuming him as he scraped black heat beneath the white winter night above. As they kicked away the smoldering frame, they were all very surprised to find such a dog hole in this day and age. I'm going to read now from another regional anthology, also published by the University of Scranton Press. This one came out last year, 2004, and it is a collection of 25 years of Mulberry poets called Palpable Clock. Now, the Mulberry Poets and Writers Association has been around our area for over 25 years now, and really is the most, I guess, widely recognized and longest running series of its kind in the area, and one of the longest running ones of its kind in the state and perhaps the nation. This anthology contains a series of poems of the whole 25 years of Mulberry Poets since its founding. The selected works from this range a wide variety of subject matter, but there are several that bear upon our subject today, which is the coal history and anthracite legacy that we are celebrating with this first edition of Graffiti. The first poem I'd like to read from this is from Jack McGuigan, John E. McGuigan officially. Jack McGuigan, a Scranton area fixture and well-known poet of the area, wrote this poem called The Coal Bin and dedicated it to Robert McGuire. Every year before the start of school and the new heating season, in preparation for Mr. Gontarski's delivery, my chore was to prepare the coal bin by shoveling what little was left from the back to the front, a busyness I'm certain my mother planned for those last hot August days. I wore a handkerchief like a bandit in a Saturday Western. A 10-year-old's idea of play alone in my 8x6 chamber, its walls blackened with decades of dust. I was a coal miner. The small window under the front porch, held open by a single hook, was the only light, the only source of fresh air, and served as an exit for the dust I didn't breathe. Tongue black, hair black, black circles under my eyes, hanky wet with black spit, hard symbols of my playful pride. 25 years after leaving his tools at the foot, my grandfather's veins turned to anthracite. The roof of his mind collapsed like a pirated pillars under the city. His coughing blackened the pillow. I became a black face with no name, and I finally realized what I loved in him. That's Jack McGuigan's poem, The Coal Bin. For those of you who might not know, the coal bin was an area typically in the basement of a house where when they made coal deliveries, you'd go down the chute, fill it with the coal, and you would use that coal to heat your homes for the rest of the winter. This poem is called Using the Tools of My Ancestors by Richard Aston. And Richard is a longtime member and participant of Mulberry Poets, resident of the Wyoming Valley area. And this is his poem in the anthology Palpable Clock. I strike a chisel against masonry precisely, surer than I can believe. The 50-year-old mortar Dad lays does not yield easily, but I strike, chink, chink, and wonder where I acquired this manual skill. It was not in my lifetime, me, skinny, sedentary, scholarly, not mason, bricklayer, setter of tile like my ancestors for generations. The modern physicist Richard Feynman said a particle goes from A to B over every possible path. It sums over all histories. Was it me striking the chisel against mortar when father, grandfather, or great-grandfather was against another stone wall? Or their ancestors down in the dark, damn mines against coal? I have been in the attic in total darkness, struck nails squarely, pounded them straight in. That's Richard Aston's poem from the anthology called Using the Tools of My Ancestors. And to finish up with our edition today, this is my poem from the anthology book, and I wrote this poem from the perspective of the Lackawanna iron furnaces on Cedar Avenue, looking at the Hotel Casey as it was being demolished. however many years ago that was. And I thought at the time, the Casey had been such a part of my life and the landscape of Scranton for so long that seeing it go, while probably necessary in the life cycle of things and making way for progress, I also thought, again, we have to remember these things that kind of meant something. And that struck me to write this particular poem called The Wrecking Ball Visits Lackawanna Avenue. 1,000 centuries of the bones of trees to blend smoky heat of coal and whiskey into this black street. These bricks pressed from the foreheads of hungry immigrants into churches and banks 100 thankless years ago. The steel ball, like a dark sun, swings from a menial boom into these ostensibly obsolete walls to make room for the graves of another negligible past. That's our poetry for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us in the first installment of Graffiti. Hopefully there'll be others. And tune in again. My name's Tom Blomain, and see ya.